Hello, my name is LoG. Welcome to part 2 of this powerful flat 5 mini-series. In the first part, we talked about using the flat 5 as simply a passing tone, always a note in between the 4 and the 5. This gave it a more subtle or mild flavor that was pretty usable for nearly every situation that you'll come across. But today, we're going to start featuring this note a little bit more, bringing out its flavor, giving it a little bit more of a medium flavor. This is going to be a stronger sound that might not work for every situation, but to have access to this sound means that you'll be able to throw out some pretty wild sounding licks whenever you want. Before we continue, let's first listen to what this sounds like. Don't forget to check out the corresponding backing track at the link above or anytime in the description. And as usual, if you enjoy this type of instruction and material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the other link in the description. And now let's get on to the lesson. So before we begin, much of what we're going to be talking about today is going to be based on those multiple fingerings that we came up with in the previous video. So if you have not seen that video, I highly recommend you watch it before you get into this one so you understand how I'm getting all those fingerings, because I'm going to be using them all today, but I'm not really going to dive in how I'm coming up with them because I kind of already did it in the previous video and I just want to save some time. So check that video out first. Once you understand how I'm putting all these fingerings together, come back and get into this one. So what we're going to do today is, like I mentioned earlier, feature this flat 5 a little bit more, bringing out the sound. And we're going to do that by very simply removing one of the adjacent notes. So as we talked about in the previous video, we were always playing flat 5 as a passing tone in between 4 and 5. So that would be 4, flat 5, 5, or 5, flat 5, 4. And the reason why that sound was like a more mild sound when it comes to using the flat 5 is because we had the 4 and the 5 always happening as well. And those two notes being normal notes and being right next to the flat 5, they almost like trap the flat 5 in between them. They act as like a buffer or like a force field. So our ears don't really hear that note as much because our ears are hearing probably the 4 or the 5 a little bit more. But today we're going to remove one of those notes. So we'll play figures that don't have 4, or we'll play figures that don't have 5. And when you do that, that flat 5, the power of the flat 5 is going to stand out more because half of that buffer is now gone, or half of that force field is now gone, and that sound is leaking out a little bit more, making it more audible when we construct our figures. So we'll do the first half of the video, we'll do one, kind of removing one of the notes. Second half of the video, we'll remove the other one. And we're going to start right now by removing the 5. So we'll only have 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, and flat 7. Interestingly enough, this sound I think is more common of the two sounds we're going to talk about today, mostly because of how we're getting into the flat 5 and the fact that this is already actually an existing sound that lives naturally in a key. So we're getting into the flat 5 by playing the 4 right behind it, right? And that move, that sound of like targeting a note by playing the note right behind it, is one of the most common ways to target a note in all of music. That's the idea of like the leading tone moving into your target note. So if I'm targeting this note, getting into it by playing the note right behind it, right, and then moving back, is by far the most common way to kind of feature a note, by hitting the note right behind it. The other way of hitting the note ahead of it is the less common. That'll be like this. Like that, immediately, the moment I play it, it already sounds like way more out, way more strange, way more kind of quirky than the other version, right? But then the other kind of main reason why this version that we're doing right here, no 5, 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5 right off the flat 7, the reason why this is also probably the more common, because this sound naturally exists in the key. It's the sound that naturally lives on the 7 chord of the key, also known as half diminished. So if you ever played like a 2, 5, 1 going to a minor chord, you've probably played this chord. That's the shape. That's 1, flat 5, flat 7, flat 3. That's essentially the sound that we're talking about right now. Right? If you do something like that, or, kind of however you want to move, play that chord a little bit better. Yeah, so that's the sound that we're talking about right here. It naturally exists in the key, so our ears are probably more familiar with it, whether they realize it or not. That is the sound we're talking about right here. So it's going to flow pretty well. Very common, especially in blues styles and a lot of different styles. Super easy to play. And of course, it's, like I said, a sound that naturally exists, so you can really kind of think about that sound instead if you want. Like if you've got a bunch of half diminished licks available, you can just play those on top of the sound, and it's going to accomplish the sound we're talking about today. That is something we're going to talk about in the next video, so I'll hold off on that for now. So let's just get started. Let's get some fingerings for this one. Going to do all 3 fingerings that we did last time, just modify without the 5. First one is going to be probably the easiest one, and that's 1 flat 3, 4 flat 5, flat 7, 1 on strings like that. 1 flat 3, 4 flat 5, flat 7, 1. So like I did before, and I'm going to kind of get into this a little bit more right now, when you come up with a figure like that, a simple 1-octave fingering, the next thing you should do is play that fingering on every single root around the fretboard. So I'm playing E flat right now to match the corresponding backing track. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play this exact fingering starting on every E flat on the guitar, and make sure I'm adapting the fingering to the tuning issues of the guitar if I need to, and just memorizing the fingering. So I'm just going to do every single one. Here's E flat right here. The shape would look like this. 1 flat 3, 4 flat 5, flat 7, 1. I have to shift up a fret right there because of the B string. Go up an octave, do the next one. Only have 2 strings worth, but you still want to do it to get that fingering. Next one. Next one. Again, looks different because of the tuning. I'm on the G string. Still the same notes though. Next E flat. Next one. And at this point, I'm kind of repeating myself. So you want to do that, and then go back and do all of them again, but starting on E flat and then descending through the sound. So for example, if I start on this E flat, I can't really descend because that would put me back here, but I can start on this one. Watch this. I'm going to come down the same sound. Right? Do the next E flat, this one right here. I can only come down 2 strings, and I'm still going to do it. How am I getting that? 1, flat 7, flat 5, 4. It's the same figure I've been playing, just starting on the root and descending. And back up. Here's our next E flat. There's that same figure, right? Same thing we played, Same thing we did down here, just in a higher register. Next one up top, change the fingering a little bit to adapt to the tuning. Next one. And then finally. At that point, I'm repeating myself again. That process of going through, taking a simple figure like this, like a specific sound, but a simple way to play that sound, doing it on every instance of the root on the fretboard, is how you are going to eventually get that full control of your playing. There are a lot of methods out there that exist, I would say most methods, that exist by forcing you to play one big scale in one position. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. We're going to do it today. But if you only do that and you just think about this one position, or maybe you think about like the stock like 5 scale shapes, you practice like that, what you'll notice is you'll feel trapped inside that position. Because if you practice in a box, that's how you're going to play. You're going to force yourself to stay right here. And you're also going to play that big scale thinking about it as one scale. But guess what? It's not. When you play a full 6-string scale shape, you're not playing one scale. You're playing 2 scales. You're playing one scale and then another one up an octave. So if you think about it as one shape, that's kind of incorrect. It's really 2. You're playing one shape and then you're continuing into the next octave, right? So if you think about it as one, you're only going to look at it as one. But if you think about it as what it actually is, 2 smaller octave shapes, 2 single octave shapes, you can then adapt. You can kind of replace one with a different one to modify your fingering, which I'll show you here today. Super important that you think about it like that. Do not play just stock box patterns because you're going to inevitably feel trapped. You want to be able to adapt, modify, like puzzle piece together shapes as you learn new ones to have more access to different positions. So I'll kind of show you what I mean. So that's our first fingering. The next step you want to do is connect multiple octaves with that same fingering exactly like we did last time. So that would look like this. I'll start here. Actually, I'll start here on this low E flat right here on the D string. So up one octave. Now when I get here, that's flat 7. Instead of playing 1 with my ring finger, I'm going to play 1 with my pointer finger, which sets me up to do the same shape again. Just 2 strings worth, but still the same shape. So that's 2 octaves worth. Next, E flat. This one's going to give me a little bit more. Again, same shape. When I get to the flat 7, slide up, continue with the pointer finger. That will allow me to continue. Right, that's 2 of the same shapes back to back. Notice what that allows me to do because I'm looking at these as small 1 octave shapes or figures. I can modify however I want, and that modification allowed me to move this way, right? In a moment, we're going to have another modification that will allow me to stay right here, which you'll see. Now let's do the last one. This one gives us the most octaves, playing on the E string as it always does. The normal fingering. Slide it with the pointer finger, do it again. Slide it with the pointer finger, do it again. Until we run out of room, descend. Right, so that's the basic shape, right? Really simple. This one's pretty straightforward. Probably the most common because it feels like that standard pentatonic scale that most people know, a shape that I call right shape. We're just taking out the 5, replacing it with the flat 5. This one is nice for a lot of reasons. I think like the main reason that people like this is it's a really nice, easy hammer-on pull-off from 4 to flat 5. So you can go like stuff like that because the 4, flat 5 are right there, pointer finger, middle finger, just feels comfortable. A lot of people will also do stuff like that, like play the flat 5, then jump up to the root, because it's right there. It's always pretty close, pretty available. So that's another kind of typical little trick, and we'll go over some licks and specific sounds with this shape here in a moment. But that one's really common, like descending the shape, jumping up an octave, doing stuff like that. If I do it up an octave as well. You know, another kind of cool one is like hammering on flat 7 to 1, jumping down to the flat 3, because it's usually pretty accessible, and then playing flat 5. It's kind of a cool one, right? Let's do it right here. Again, just thinking about the strengths of this fingering, coming up with some shapes that are common or comfortable. Another one that a lot of people like to do is the classic, like, kind of tritone power chord or whatever. You can think about a normal power chord. Take the 5, pull it back a fret. So now you have like a flat 5 power chord. A lot of people will use these. Right, that's just me moving up 1, flat 5, 1. That can be kind of a fun shape depending on what you're trying to do. That's just me doing it multiple times in a row. 1, flat 5, 1, flat 5, 1. Excuse me. Do it again, right? It's just a little borderline corny sound, but it can be kind of fun depending on what you're trying to do. So that's that figure. Another one that's really nice that lives inside here that we'll talk about in a moment is this figure, the 4, flat 5, flat 7, 1. Very colorful shape that can really be used for quite a bit. So keep that little shape in mind. It can be really valuable. I'll do it up an octave right here. Of course, when you do it on the D string, it looks a little bit different. With a little bit of a modification of the fingering, you can get there pretty easily. So that's the first fingering. Next fingering is going to be similar to what we did last time. We're going to move the flat 3, but keep everything else where it is. So the first one was 1, flat 3 on the same string, 4, flat 5 on the next. This one is going to be 1 on the string kind of by itself, maybe flat 7 right behind it, and then flat 3, 4, flat 5 all on the same string. Just like that. And then flat 7, 1 on the next string like they were in the previous fingering. So the only real difference here is removing the 3. Instead of the 3 over here, the 3 is now over there. Let's get a bunch of fingerings for these or kind of moving them around the fretboard. Again, what's the kind of characteristic of this one? Where we are now oriented. So earlier, my pointer finger was on the root, but with this fingering, my ring finger's on the root. So that puts us kind of in this position. So naturally, I won't be able to play this one starting on this E flat because I don't have space back here to play. But I can do this one right here. 2 strings worth. Right? Back to our original position. Can kind of get the full shape out of that one. Next octave, same thing. Adjust for the tuning of the guitar, of course. Next E flat. Next E flat. Here's the D string, the one that I couldn't do down here, but now I'm up here, so I can do it. That one's a little bit tricky because you do have to adapt to the tuning of the guitar. The flat 5 and the flat 7 are on the same fret, which can be kind of awkward. And you just kind of adapt however you want. This one, of course, flows pretty well as you play one into the next. So that would sound like this. Right? So 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. Do it again. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7, 1. If I do it on the E string, same thing. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. Do it again on this next octave. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. Do it again on this next octave. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, etc. So that one flows pretty well, and we'll go over some licks and whatnot with that one. And the next step you want to do is start to combine, right? Combine the two fingerings that we have so far. So let's just experiment. Let's just see what happens. How about I play the fingering 1 into fingering 2? Let's see what that's like. Fingering 1 starts here. That's my next octave, my next root. So I'm going to do fingering 2, what I just came up with. Flat 3, 4, 5 on the same string. Flows pretty well, right? I'm kind of moving up in the same way that I did when I was just playing fingering 1 into fingering 1, but, you know, maybe get some different things out of it. Maybe it feels a little bit more comfortable for some reason. Let's do the opposite, fingering 2 into fingering 1. Let's try that. That one's a nice kind of slidey shape. So fingering 2, flat 3, 4, 5 all on the same string, flat 7, 1 with my pointer. That gets me into this position. Right? But here's something else I can do. Notice this one. This one is taking me like almost, half the fretboard up. I'm starting here and ending up here, which is valuable. But what happens if I did this? 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. Instead of playing this one, I play this one, which of course, if you know the fretboard, you should know that that's also a root. Flat 7 root or flat 7 root. Well, that's on my pointer finger, which sets me up perfectly for a little bit of the first fingering. So now I can play fingering 2 to here, fingering 1. Notice what that does. It keeps me in this position, right? Which gives me some opportunities that I couldn't get in other spots that we'll talk about here in a moment. So you kind of see what I was mentioning earlier about how you don't want to practice a big scale as one thing. You want to look at it as two separate things. Because if I played, let's say, this shape, and just felt it and practiced it as one scale, I wouldn't recognize that, oh, this is actually one shape, and then this is another one, right? Just kind of starting on those two different roots. So because I do know that, I can modify it whenever I want. I can say, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to go to this root. I'm going to go to this root and move somewhere else. And I can do that because I'm not looking at this as one giant shape that lives here. I'm looking at it as multiple little ones that I can kind of modify, like puzzle piece them together in whatever way I want to achieve certain things, right? So that's that fingering. Again, practice it however you want. We're going to go over some specific licks for that fingering here in a moment. One thing that does stand out that is really common with this one's perfect for sliding into that flat 5. It's also perfect for bending into that flat 5. So if I play 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, there it is. Super common. I'm sure you've heard and played that before. And then if you do it on a higher register, you can easily make that bend. Because that's the fingering, right? Root by itself, flat 3, 4, 5 on the same string. All right, if I move up an octave right here, that's the classic positioning, right? 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5 right there. Kind of that standard, blues shape that everyone plays. And then dipping into fingering 1, right? Moving around however you want. So that's pretty nice. The last fingering is going to be the trickiest one and probably the one that looks like it might be the least useful. But again, there's a lot of nice things you can do with this one. And that is keeping 1, flat 3, 4, like we just did, fingering 2, moving the flat 5 to the next string. So that means we have 4 flat 5 on different strings. Like that. So obviously that sound right there, playing 4 and flat 5 at the same time, is only possible with this configuration. Wasn't possible with the others. So this gives us kind of the most kind of odd sound of all of them. So I'll run this one in all the octaves. Because of the nature of this one, very stretchy, there aren't that many ways to play this one, but I'll do as many as I can. I can't do it off that E flat, don't have the room back here, but I can start here on this E flat. Right? Can't really do it off this E flat either, don't have enough strings, but I can do it off of this one right here. really cool one. This E flat up top can definitely do it here. Right, up an octave right here. This one is the easiest one because of the tuning of the guitar. So we have 4 flat 5, what feels like only 2 fret stretch between them, whereas every other one, it's a 3 fret stretch. You can see all 3 of those frets in between those 2 notes. So this one is probably the easiest. Right, and that's pretty much all of them. So we only have a handful of ways to play these, but let's just see what happens. Maybe if I start kind of connecting them, see what happens. I'm going to play this one into that one, right? Fingering number 3, 4 flat 5 on different strings, like that. Move up to the next root, do it again. So that creates like a little bit of a stretchy shape. Might seem kind of unusable in certain ways because it is just such a large shape, but we're going to talk about some interesting ways to approach this one. Let's do the last combination. That one's pretty cool, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Again, I'm just connecting the shape in as many ways as I can. Are there ways that I can kind of combine them, right? I've got 3 fingerings. How can I combine them? Let's start, how about this? Let's start with fingering 2, dip into fingering 3 like I just did. And then I came down and fingering 1, right? So you see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of modifying whatever I'm doing in the moment to get the sound that I want, to get the shape that I want, right? How about we do fingering 3? Let's try that. Into fingering 1 right here. That's my E flat. So I can do that right there. So one really important thing, even though this fingering might seem kind of odd and not that useful, the one thing that I would take home from it is the fact that flat 5 and flat 7 are on the same string. So of course you can play that, you can do some shenanigans jumping around the strings, but just keep in mind this distance, the distance between flat 5 and flat 7, because that could come in handy in other places. For example, if I've got a fingering 1 up top, of course, I only have 2 strings worth. I don't have another string to keep going. But if I've memorized this distance from fingering 3, I know that this is the distance from flat 5 to flat 7, like a major third, 2 whole steps. So I can do this. See that little modification I made? I'm starting with the first fingering, but because I know this is flat 5 and I've just learned that this is flat 7, that distance, I can easily make that jump and come down however I want, right? So that's the beauty of having multiple fingerings, not being married to like one giant shape that lives in one position, being able to adapt, being able to switch, and trying to, I know it's hard, trying to always know the notes that are underneath your fingers at any moment, because then you'll start to memorize little connections that you can make as you maneuver around the fretboard. So with all that in mind, let's transition over now to some kind of interesting licks and specific things that go with each fingering. So this is a collection of either general sounds that I like or specific licks that use this sound, this 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, no 5, flat 7, 1. The first one is going to be this exact sound, but leave out the flat 7. No flat 7 in this sound, which gives us a nice big jump from the flat 5 up to the root, which is a tritone, which is a very significant sound. So if I play that, 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, right to 1. Right, I'm sure you've heard that before, like extra hard bluesy sound. And my favorite kind of combination of fingerings to play this sound will be fingering number 1, flat 3 on the same string. Then when I get here to the next octave, fingering number 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5 on the same string. A little bit of a fingering change right there so I can grab this root up top, and it sounds like this. See that? That's 1, flat 3, 4, 5 all on the same string. Reaching up to the 1, not playing the flat 7, which would usually be there, just skipping that note, going right here. And that's me flowing in between both of them. Another one that's really nice is doing it up here in the higher register. Finger number 2, 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, descend. 1 up top, jump right down to that flat 5, which looks like a power chord now because of the tuning. Maybe bend up to it, maybe a half step bend. Right, pretty cool sound. And I can, of course, try another fingering. This one's kind of fun because it allows us to kind of skip some strings a little bit. I know I can do this. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5. That's fingering number 2. I know the root would be here if I wanted to make that jump. That's kind of the one I was just doing. But if it's here, it's also here. So I can do this. flows into fingering number 1 on this E string right here. So one more time. Pretty cool sound. Let's try that over the track, see what that sounds like. Start it right about here. Same shape, nice and slow. Pretty cool. Let's try the one up top. Definitely cool. Have a little string skip. Right, immediately, pretty cool sounds. Again, that's like an extra hard sound because we're not only featuring that flat 5, but we're jumping that tritone up to the root. Very cool sounding. Nice. And then another one that is kind of similar, honestly, I'm just going to sneak in here, is just jumping in general from the flat 5 to other notes or from other notes to the flat 5. So, you know, if I'm playing, let's say up here, 1 flat 3, root flat 3, and then maybe play the 4, jump down to the 5 right there. 1 flat 3, 4, jump down to the flat 5. You get some really nice sounds. Speaking of that, the original example I gave in the previous video of Enter Sandman is literally that. Enter Sandman, the main riff, is exactly what we're talking about right here. Minor pentatonic with no 5, flat 5 instead. Right, if I play the riff, that's literally what we're doing. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 4, right? Not only am I playing that sound, but I'm also jumping to the flat 5. So if you want to get this sound in your head, just listen to Enter Sandman, right? That's the exact sound. Up the octave, let's try one. That's 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, up to 4 up the octave. Creates like a major 7 interval, which is pretty cool. Let's see what that sounds like over the track. Very nice. Again, real nasty when I play it like that, but very different melodic flavor. Right? Enter Sandman? Right? Pretty cool. Okay, so that's jumping to the 5, or the flat 5, I should say. The other one is featuring or kind of bringing out the normal 2. So that's a note we have not been playing in this whole series, but you can easily play that because 2 is a very normal note in pretty much, I don't want to say every minor context, but most minor contexts. 2 is very normal. Where is 2? Up a whole step from 1. Back a fret from flat 3. So 1, 2, flat 3. So if I sneak that into the sound, right? 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7, 1. Almost sounds like I'm playing a different scale now. If I do 2 octaves of that. Right? Sounds like a very kind of exotic sound. I'm playing the same thing we've been talking about, just playing 1 extra note, the 2, which in of itself is a very normal note. One of my favorite licks to kind of play the 2 is almost playing the 2 and also jumping to the flat 5. Watch this. If this is 2 up top, here's our root, 2 right there. Jump down to the flat 5 here. And maybe end like that. So I'm playing flat 5, 4, flat 3, and then a big bend. So you can kind of get into it by doing something like this. One of my favorite licks. This is just minor pentatonic, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. Targeting the root right there. Moving up to 2. Jump down the flat 5. You can even hold them like a chord. Let me try one more time. Right? Very nasty. Again, that's the point. Let's see what it sounds like over the track, featuring the 2. Okay, I added one more note in there. I apologize. But let's play this lick with the 2 on top. Really nice. Very nasty when you play it like that, but again, that is the point. Okay, this next one is like a long kind of connector lick based on fingering number 2. Sounds like this. I'll just play it first. Get that top note. This one is fingering number 2, just in its entirety connecting different octaves, but with a specific pattern. I start on flat 7, move up to the flat 3, jump up to flat 5, walk back. And then end on flat 5, and then do it again up the octave. So I'll do it once right here. Up the octave, do the same thing. Up the octave, do the same thing. And then kind of end however you want. Flows really well for some reason with my picking. I'm kind of throwing in some hammer-ons and pull-offs in there. But I think it might be comfortable to pick too. Yeah, if you're an alternate picker, this one might actually be pretty comfortable. Let's try with the track. End however you want. Flows pretty well quickly as well. Really nice. Just like a flurry of notes. Again, why am I doing that? It's a comfortable fingering, just fingering number 2 the whole way. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, all in the same string. And just finding some combination that's comfortable to pick through. Pretty straightforward. And then the last one I really like because it features one of my... Actually, no, I've got 2 more, sorry. This one is uses an interesting combination of fingerings that allows us to kind of hold some notes together. So if I play fingering number 2 right here, right, and then play into fingering number 1 right here, I talked about that one earlier, it keeps us in this position. There's our next root. Playing that, look at what I can play. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7, 1 at the same time. That gives us a little chord. Can't really do this with other combinations of fingering, at least not as easy as this. And then on top of it, if this is 1, I can bar and get the 4 as well. Watch this chord. I can do all of that at the same time because I know all of those notes exist in this sound. And I'm featuring the flat 5 because it's the bass note. Let's just see what this sounds like over the track. Again, gonna be nasty, but that is the point. Really nice. I'm a huge fan of that one. It's just like pulls your ear in this way that you would not expect. That again, just adds color to the sound. And then the last one, this is the one I was going to talk about earlier. This is featuring the 4. So far we've been doing this sort of thing. Always walking up like that, kind of leading up to the flat 5. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5. I'm going to do this now. 1, flat 3, flat 5, then 4. When you do that, you feature this note. It's one of my favorite notes over minor for whatever reason. I play it a lot. I play it a lot in these solos that I've been doing in the beginning of the videos. And a really great way to play this is by using fingering number 3. So I'm going to do it up here. So check this out. 1, I'll start on flat 7. Here's my root. Flat 7, 1, flat 3, flat 5. That's the hallmark of fingering number 3, where you have 4 and flat 5 on different strings. Watch this. So you see what I'm doing there? Playing the flat 5 and then jumping down to the 4. It's really comfortable with my technique as well because I'm going pick, hammer on, middle finger over here, ring finger, and then pick. And maybe I can jump up to another note. Right? How about jump up to 2 or adding 2 in? Very different sounds, right? I was doing this like earlier. It was kind of hard. I don't know if I can play it, but it was like a connection of things. It sounded like this. Let's see. Right, kind of an involved lick, but notice the whole point of this is really featuring the 4, playing like a flurry of notes, and then landing on the floor, or landing on the 4, excuse me. Really, really cool sound. It's one of my favorites. Let's see what it sounds like on the track. Again, it sounds like a really fancy out kind of wild sound. It's literally what we've been doing this whole time, just minor pentatonic with no 5, flat 5 instead. But the way that I'm organizing the notes, featuring this different note that maybe you wouldn't feature, the 4, and doing it in kind of whatever way I want. I was kind of also doing it up top as well. This is my root, so I'm playing flat 7, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7 up top, and then jumping down to the 4. Maybe moving around to other notes. So you see these kind of like big jumps and maybe unpredictable moves that I'm making. The sound itself is so simple. It's just how I'm approaching these notes in ways that are comfortable, ways that are achieving a sound that I want. So yeah, that's this sound. Again, minor pentatonic with flat 5, just leaving out the 5, which gives us 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7, and then 1. And now let's get on to the next sound where it's the exact same thing, except we're leaving out the 4 and putting the 5 back in. The first sound that we went through has more of like a bluesy flavor when we play it. This one is going to have a little bit more of like a quirky sound, I suppose. And it really has to do with how we are accessing or getting into that flat 5. Before, we were getting into the flat 5 from the half step behind, right? That kind of leading tone sound. right? But now we're getting into it either from the flat 3, which is 3 frets away, like that, or from the 5, which is 1 fret above. Like the moment I play that, doesn't that flat 5 kind of stand out a little bit more when I do it like that? And that's why approaching a note, especially an out-of-key note from the half step above, will always produce this kind of a little bit more stronger, a little bit more out or more odd sound, and that's what we're doing right here. So let's get some fingerings. So the first one's going to be pretty straightforward, just the standard shape that we went through before, the first fingering, 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, flat 7, 1. Let's run that on every E flat, just see what it all looks like. D string, B string, A string, G string, E string up top, D string again. Again, figuring out your fingerings, making sure you know what fingers you want to use. This one can be kind of tricky because it's a lot of like middle finger, ring finger action. Like if I do this, that can be kind of uncomfortable if you know you're still kind of working through using all 4 of your fingers. Even, I mean, I'm playing it right now and I sort of feels a little bit uncomfortable for me. This one definitely feels more comfortable because you're using pointer middle, and those are very strong fingers. Middle ring can be a little bit more odd, so feel free to adjust your fingering, of course. You can do pointer, pinky, point your finger on that flat 5, maybe middle on the normal 5. Do something like that. It's kind of up to you, but keep in mind it can be a little strange. So that's the first fingering. Of course, you know, connecting however you want. Let's try to connect a couple of them. Let's do this one up top. So we've got 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, flat 7, slide up, do it again. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, flat 7, slide up, do it again. Again, we're going to talk about a figure that works with that shape here in a moment because it's very cool sounding. And then, you know, connect them, move however you want. Let's try another fingering. This one is going to be the same sort of idea. We're just moving the flat 3. So this one's going to be a little bit different because we have a bigger stretch between the two. So earlier we had 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5 all on the same string. Now we've got 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5 on the same string. Right, a little bit bigger of a stretch, but can still be pretty valuable. Let's just kind of connect some of these, see what it looks like. Next octave right here. That's a nice little figure that you get out of that. That's not that difficult to play. It can be kind of, play a little better, it can be kind of odd traveling between these because the stretch is so big between that flat 3, flat 5, 5. It can be pretty valuable if you get comfortable with it and find some configurations that you like. Now, this is where things get a little weird in that we have actually 2 more fingerings. We have 4 fingerings total for this one instead of the 3 like we did for the previous sound. So the next one is another odd one, but has some interesting sounds. Of course, very similar to what we did earlier. 1, flat 3, flat 5, and then 5 on the next string. And then we have flat 7 after that. I actually like this one a lot because works with this certain licks that I like to play. But again, what can we get out of this? Flat 5, 5 on different strings, allowing us to play the 2 if we want. We kind of talked about that in the first video, but I'll just kind of recap a little bit more. Let's try it up the octave on the G string. 1, flat 3, right to flat 5, 5, right? That's me just kind of doing a little bit of a combination of some fingerings. Here's the first fingering into the one that I just did. Here's my root. 1, flat 3, flat 5, right to normal 5. You see what I can get out of that? Very different sounding because I can play, of course, flat 5 and 5 at the same time. Here's another really easy version of that. Up top, E string, 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5. Move to that next string. Flat 7, right? Slide up to the root. Do it again. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5. This one, of course, is easier, as it always is, because there's only 2 frets in between these 2 fingers, whereas all of the other ones, 3 frets in between the flat 5 and the 5. Very similar to what we were doing before with the 4 and the flat 5. Same idea. That one is about as easy as it gets because we have all of these notes on the same 2 frets. 1, flat 3, right? Flat 5, just next string down. 5, flat 7. Doesn't get easier than that. That's why this shape is so popular, because these notes are so easily accessible. And then you can play 1, flat 3 on top. transition into that fingering. Notice what I did at the bottom, fingering 1. Or if I wanted to, I could do this. Right, that's kind of fingering 2 with that little bit of a stretch right there. Again, emphasizing what I talked about earlier. If I just practice this as one scale and I only think about it as one scale, that little modification that I made right there might not come out naturally. I might not see it because I'm not looking for it. I'm not looking at this as 2 little pieces. I'm looking at it as one big piece, and that doesn't allow me to adapt like I might want to. What's another way I could adapt? I could do that same figure that I just did, where I've got flat 5, 5 on different strings. So if I'm here, I can come down flat 3, there's my 1. I can do this, 1, flat 7, right? And then down to 5 on the same string. I have to figure out a fingering for that one. That was pretty comfortable. Again, that's the same 2 fingerings in a row right there. I'm doing it starting on this octave, or on that E flat, and then this one. Because I'm thinking about these fingerings as small 1-octave shapes, not this like massive, 2-octave shape that I'll always play the same way all the time. I'm mixing and matching, combining them in ways that I want to try to get some cool ideas. And we'll talk about some ideas that we can get with these here in a moment. And then the last fingering is one that we sort of talked about last time, but also has some value. This is 1 flat 3, and that's it on those 2 strings, and then flat 5, 5 on the next string. So that looks like this. Here's normal 1, 3, 5, flat 3, of course. So here's flat 5, just back a fret, right? So we get a little like diminished triad out of it when we play like this. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, just a little slide. I like this one quite a bit because it flows really well when you connect them. Watch this. Flat 7, slide up to 1, do it again. One of my favorite shapes. And you kind of move however you want after that. So you might be saying, why does this one have 4 fingerings and the other one only had 3? Well, the other one you could technically do 4. It would just be really like, it almost doesn't make sense to do it because that would look like this. If we had the 1 flat 3 and then the 4 and flat 5 on the next string, that would be this. I mean, we're like, that's a massive position change at that point. So it's not really even, it's more like we're combining 2 smaller fingerings. So I didn't really talk about this one, but this one is pretty viable because we can grab everything for the most part. 1, flat 3, 5, or excuse me, flat 5, 5. Can do it up here as well on the high E flat. Right? And then of course, where does that put me? Pointer finger, which means I can do the first fingering. So you see that little drop? Then when you drop into the flat 5 like that, coming from the normal 5, it's such a stronger sound. That is very different than the other one. The other one has that more bluesy flavor. This one is super strong when you drop back into it like that. So those are the fingerings, okay? So keep that stuff in mind. Figure out which ones you like. Obviously, you don't have to practice all of them. There are going to be certain ones that are going to be more comfortable than others. But I think they're all pretty valuable. So now let's get over to some kind of licks and tricks and shapes that use all of these fingerings in unique ways. All right, so this is going to be just a couple ideas that I personally like that feature the sound that we're talking about, very similar to what we did earlier. And this first idea is also going to be pretty similar to what we did earlier. We're going to play the sound, leave out the flat 7. But when we do that, we actually now have a literal minor arpeggio, 1, 3, 5, 1, flat 3, because we're playing minor, plus the flat 5. Really bringing out that kind of quirky sound. Let's do it with this arpeggio shape that most people know. Okay, so this shape, I actually don't think about it as one shape. I think about it as 2, 1, 3, 5, and then 1, 3, 5. Personally, I like that better because it's just easier for me to always know the notes under my fingers because memorizing just this little 1, 3, 5 and then this little 1, 3, 5, just easier to memorize. And then, of course, I can kind of mix and match the puzzle pieces of these smaller shapes. Like, I don't have to do this. I can do this instead. Right, 1, flat 3, 5 instead of 1, flat 3, 5. So when you think about things as smaller pieces, it's just easier to adapt, easier to understand what you're doing. Let's add in the flat 5s. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5. Let me do that. Right, so notice on the way back, I'm playing flat 5, or excuse me, 5, flat 5, and then down. So you're really hearing that flat 5 because I'm moving down into it. If that sounds a little too wonky for you, you can always play flat 5 up into 5 regardless of direction. So you can do this. Flat 5, 5, flat 5, 5, flat 5, 5. So even on the way down, I'm still moving into the 5 like that. One more time. Right? Really cool, it kind of way to achieve this sound that's a little softer than how we were doing it before. Here's another kind of collection of fingerings. Fingering 1 2 times in a row. Again, fingering 2. Let's do that. Definitely easy to play. It flows really well. Just kind of 2 notes per string, that sort of thing. Here's fingering number 3, which gives you some interesting opportunities. 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, 1. You have to kind of do a big stretch right there, but works pretty well. Here's another fingering that's kind of a combination, sort of. 1, flat 3, flat 5, and then 5, 1. So we're retaining the 5, 1 right here, but playing the first 3 notes as though we're playing fingering 1. Feels like we're doing that, but we're reaching back here for the 5. Right, some interesting opportunities. Maybe you can go up 1, down the next. Right, see what I'm doing there? 1, flat 3 on the way back, flat 3 right here. That just kind of puts me into this position. Right, so let's try all of these over the track, see what happens. How about this one on the top? Pretty cool. How about this stretchy one? That one's nice because we get this. That's the flat 5, 5 on 2 different strings. Let me go over this as well. So this is another kind of fingering I was using to get into this one. Root right here, 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, roll the finger into the next. I like this one because it works well with my technique. Pick, middle finger, hammer on, middle finger, ring finger. It flows pretty well. Still hard to play though. It's just such an odd feeling shape, but it works pretty well, I think. Let's try it over the track. So it's a nice kind of build into another idea. Again. That was incorrect. Let me try it again. So what's kind of interesting is I was making a mistake right there, but the mistake was pretty cool. I wasn't getting all the way to the flat 5. I was playing 4 instead, which honestly sounded pretty cool. So again, just making little modifications, super easy to do with this sound. Okay, the next one, this next idea, I like to call it's like forgetting the 5. So you play a passage that does not have the 5, and then you go back and play it eventually. So let's say this, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, 1. I skip the 5 entirely, but then I'm going to go back and get it. So like, right? So walking up, skipping the 5, but then going back and getting it. Flat 5, 5. How about on the high register as well? So what did I do there? I got to the top, played a little flat 5 thing, no normal 5, and then I played the normal 5. Try that one more time. So that one right there, notice I played a bunch of notes all kind of around the 5, but never actually hitting the 5. I played flat 5 on top, flat 3, 1 like a little arpeggio, then flat 7 on top, and then the 5. So I'm kind of forgetting it and then getting it later. Pretty cool sound. Let's see that over the track. Same thing. Roll it back a little bit. Pretty cool sound. Subtle, kind of makes you want to hear that 5 because you're not playing it at all. And then when you do play it, it's pretty satisfying. This is another one that I really like, and it has to do with adding in one of the notes we added in earlier, the 2 of the sound. So where is 2? Always back and fret from flat 3. Let's just hear what that sounds like. 1, 2, flat 3, flat 5, 5. So the main thing about this that's really interesting is we have 2 of these little major thirds next to each other. Watch this. 5, flat 3, normal. Flat 5, 2. Right? Doesn't that feel like we're playing... like, I don't know, like Slayer or something. like those sort of things, these like moving moving major thirds. So there's one figure I was playing that I really like. It sounds like this. Starting on top on the 5th, 1, 3, 5, going down the little major third, 5, flat 3, flat 5, 2, and then continuing that pattern down through the sound. More time. Right, it sounds real different. It sounds real wild, but all I'm doing is playing standard minor with a 2, flat 5, but no 4, right? Everything is really stemming from basic minor. I'm just kind of modifying a couple notes here and there. It's such a cool sound. Let me try this over the track, see what it sounds like. I actually also like using this at the end of the phrase right here. Right? Because I personally really like sneaking in like the real wacky sounding licks at the end of the phrases, because then when you resolve, it hits extra hard. I'll try that one more time. Roll back a little bit. So, normal. Right here. Right, super cool when you fit it in at the end of those phrases. That's kind of a side note too. If you're ever trying to play sounds that are maybe a little like strange or odd, and you don't know where to play them, always put them at the end of the bar, leading into the next bar, because then when you finish the idea, it resolves properly alongside the rest of the track. It'll always flow a little bit better. And then this last one's just kind of silly, just because it's kind of fun. And again, it's kind of featuring the flat 5 moving into 5, as we've been doing, but also the 2, like we just did. Watch this figure. So I discovered this by just messing around, right? Giving myself criteria, like I talked about in the previous video. So here I am, 1, flat 3. I know that this is 2, right back 1 fret. So I can see this shape, flat 2, or excuse me, not flat 2, normal 2, flat 3, reaching up with my pinky, playing the flat 5, and then I can literally just move down a string and do it again, because this is flat 5, 5, flat 7. So I have this figure that's the same fingering 2 times in a row. That's kind of easy to play. But obviously very wild sounding. And then I can keep doing this kind of 3-note per string thing up top, flat 7, 1, flat 3, kind of similar to what we were doing in the previous video with some of these sounds. And on the root right there, so our ears don't explode. Let's try this over the track. So... Again, do you want to start your solos with that? Is that the first thing you want to play for your audience? Probably not. That might be something you need to work your way into, because it is kind of odd, but it's there. And again, how did I come up with it? Just by giving myself criteria, forcing myself to play flat 5 into 5, which is happening definitely. And I just noticed, oh, look at that. If I play 2, I can play 2, flat 3. And then on the next string is flat 5, 5. That's easy. And then if I stretch up here, I can get the flat 5 again. And then if I stretch up here, that's flat 7. All of those notes are notes that I'm allowing myself to play, and you get some wild stuff like that. Pretty straightforward, right? I mean, all I'm doing is just kind of thinking about the criteria that I want, playing the notes in whatever ways make the most sense, and you get some really interesting sounds. So similar to how I wrapped up the first video, we're going to talk about using all of these sounds over the relative major. We want to see if there's any dual use of these sounds, any ways that we can play these sounds on top of the relative major, because if there were, that means we have 2 places to play these sounds in pretty easy ways. So the whole sound that we've been playing so far is E flat minor. What's the relative major? It would be right here, up 3 frets major. So G flat. Even though it's G flat, I'm going to call it F sharp because it just sounds better to me. F sharp major is the relative major. What would these sounds be on top of this chord? We know what they would be on top of the original E flat. The first sound, that minor pentatonic with no 5, that would be 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. What would that be of F sharp major though? That would be 6, 1, 2, flat 3, 5. Right? What is that sound? That's like minor 6, this sort of sound, right? Which makes sense, because that sound really is E flat minor 7 flat 5, or half diminished, and this is the same chord. We don't have to get into the weeds with that stuff. But is there a use for this? Could we play this sound on top of the relative major if that chord was happening? If this was the chord going on, right? F sharp major. Could we pretend E flat minor with no 5? Could we pretend that sound instead? Well, let's try it. Here's an F sharp major chord, and I'm just going to run that sound how it is. Let's see what happens. also, you notice what I'm doing. I'm adjusting the notes that I'm choosing to land on. Like I'm choosing to land on F sharps a lot more because that's the root of the actual chord. Whereas if I was playing E flat minor, I would probably land on E flat, the root of that. So I'm not landing on that note. I'm now landing on the F sharp, the root of that. And what sound was created? On top of F sharp major, it created this like mixing minor and major sort of sound because I'm playing a minor sound. That's F sharp minor when I play it. But on top of the F sharp major, it gives it that interesting color. And then, of course, I can always just dip back into normal major, and that'll be fine. Let's try that. Same sound. Right, that's that sound by just dipping back into F sharp major. So this sound has dual use. If you're playing over a major chord, let's say F sharp, you can go back 3 frets to the relative minor. I don't even care what chord that is. I just know that's always the relative minor. And I can play this sound, minor pentatonic with no 5, flat 5 instead. And kind of maneuver however I want. Right, so nice, I have dual use out of that. What about the other one? That was a V flat minor. That would be 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, and then flat 7. Of F sharp major, what would that be? Still 6 and 1, flat 3, normal 3, and then 5. Right? So what is that sound? Again, mixing that minor sound in there. But we also have the major 3. This is an unbelievably common sound in like country and whatnot. You get this kind of quirky sound. Maybe that's where the quirkiness of this sound comes from. Right? So you hear that sound, same thing. I'm targeting F sharp in this case. I'm not targeting E flat because the chord is now this. Let's see what that sounds like if I just run a big kind of shape of this. Doesn't it sound so kind of country or almost like bluegrassy or very major sounding? I'm playing the exact same sound that we went over, E flat minor with no 4, but flat 5 and 5, but I'm just doing it on top of this new context, this F sharp major chord, and I'm changing the notes that I'm targeting. Maybe I'll do this. Sit on this note because that's the root of this, and it immediately gives it that sound, that nice little mixture of that flat 3, normal 3, 1. So you can experiment with this too. If you're playing over a major sound like F sharp major, or really any major, doesn't matter what it is, go back 3 frets to the relative minor and play this sound, 1, flat 3, flat 5, 5, the second sound we talked about today, and see what happens. It's going to give you that nice kind of mixture of major and minor, very country sound if you want that sound, right? So these are just some extra things you can experiment with. And what are we doing right here? The concept that we're doing right here, I call it pretend chords, right? Where the chord is actually this, but you're pretending something else, like E flat minor with no 4. You're pretending one chord is happening because then your hands and your eyes and your brain can kind of get into that sound. And if you've got a bunch of licks already in that sound, you can start playing them pretending that it's this chord where it's actually this. And you have tons of material you can come up with. You get dual uses out of all of these licks. It's just a really easy way to navigate around the fretboard and use different sounds without having to like relearn brand new licks every time. And this concept of pretend chords is what the next video is going to be about in its entirety, because there's some really nice ways we can really bring out that flat 5 in a very strong way. That does it for the second part of this powerful flat 5 mini-series. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And I'll see you all in the final part where we go over using the flat 5 with a strong flavor.